The idea of providing accommodation was actually illegal in many countries. Even the company's founders didn't think any of it would work. The CEO knew nothing about business, yet just by everything. Airbnb has become a billion-dollar company and one of the greatest business success stories of the digital age. They're the largest accommodation provider in the world, yet they don't own any real estate. How did the founders go from selling cereals to owning a $25 billion company? Here's to the most inspiring story of the 21st century. Brian and Joe were on the verge of getting evicted from their apartments due to unpaid rent. They had an idea that they could create a bed and breakfast service for the upcoming design conference in the city. They had 3 Airbeds to offer and created a basic website called Airbed and Breakfast, using a free WordPress template. Though the idea was met with skepticism, they'd managed to get a few people to pay to stay with them, and everyone had a great time. The weekend was successful, and they made enough money to pay their rent. They realized that Airbed and Breakfast was not their long-term business idea and began thinking of new business ideas. Brian and Joe had trouble coming up with new business ideas, so they went back to their Airbed idea, which had been a lot of fun. They recruited their old roommate Nathan, a computer programmer, to help them make a more legitimate and professional-looking site. They relaunched their bed and breakfast, advertising it as a new lodging service for sold-out conferences. However, most people were very skeptical, and they only got 2 paying customers. They believed that if enough people tried it, they'd see it could be a great experience. They decided to relaunch Airbnb once again when they heard that 75,000 people were coming to the Democratic National Convention. They contacted every single blog and journalist they could to tell them about this new service. Soon they had so much traffic that their website crashed and PayPal banned their account for receiving too many payments too quickly. But once they got those problems resolved, they were excited as hundreds of people were listing their rooms on the site and other people were booking them. The only problem was that as soon as the conference ended, people stopped booking rooms, and they were back to square one with no customers. Brian and Joe had a service called airbedandbreakfast.com, which connected convention goers at both conventions looking for a cheap place to stay with residents who had space on their couch or an extra room. However, they needed to find a way to get people using the service all year round. But they were still very low on cash. Brian set up meetings with different angel investors. However, the meetings went horribly. One investor they met at a cafe literally just got up halfway through and walked out of the meeting. The big problem was that their idea sounded so risky. Letting people rent out space in their house to total strangers sounded like it would end in disaster, and their business model involved taking just a small transaction fee on each deal. If you heard that investment pitch back in 2008, you probably wouldn't have invested either. So, one after another, investors turned Brian down. Little did they know, if they had invested $150,000 back then, which is what Brian was looking for, today their investment would be worth multiple billions of dollars. So Brian and Joe had to take on credit card debt just to keep the business afloat. For Brian and Joe, this was rock bottom. They were totally in debt, didn't know what to do, and were desperate. So, as crazy as it sounds, they decided to focus on the breakfast part of their bed and breakfast instead. And in order to capitalize on the upcoming election, they created 2 limited edition cereal brands, Obama O's and Captain McCain's. Brian found a fellow college alumni who had a printing shop and agreed to print 1,000 cereal boxes for free if they gave him a cut of the sales. Brian and Joe then went through every local supermarket to try and find the cheapest cereal they could, and then bought 1,000 boxes of it so they could put it into their new designer packaging. Back in their kitchen, they got to work hand-folding the cereal boxes and gluing them to their shirts. This weird cereal gimmick actually worked. They sent some of these cereal boxes to journalists who inevitably wrote about them, and people started buying the boxes for ridiculously high prices because they branded them as rare collectible items. As a result, they ended up getting national media attention and even got mentioned on CNN. Obama sold out within 3 days, and people even started reselling them on eBay and Craigslist. Little did the Airbnb founders know, they were about to build one of the fastest-growing startups in history. Shortly after joining Y Combinator, the founders had a huge revelation. They had been thinking way too small. At the time, their service was called Air Bed and Breakfast, and the rule was that you specifically had to rent out an air mattress, even if you had an actual bed to spare. Not only that, but the host had to be present at the house so they could provide breakfasts. So they finally decided to get rid of all these restrictions and shorten their name to simply Airbnb, and almost immediately demand increased. Another key realization was that users were terrible at taking nice photos of their apartments, so Airbnb agreed to send out professional photographers to help people take better pictures of their homes. This was expensive for Airbnb, but it paid off massively. Bookings for properties soared once the photo quality increased. Momentum was building fast. They even started getting quirky listings like tree houses, castles, or even igloos. This helps explain why Airbnb suddenly started to take off. Many people have become tired of the mass commodification of hotels, where every single one looks the same. People crave that authentic experience. They wanted to fully experience the country's unique culture and live like a local. And Airbnb allowed them to quite literally live like a local. Rather than just staying in busy tourist areas, you could move into a local's home, and sometimes they'd be there as well to tell you about the city. When discussing Airbnb, some people point out that the idea of short-term rentals wasn't actually new. There were sites like Couchsurfing, HomeAway, and even Craigslist. But another one of the key reasons for Airbnb's success was that they focused on making the whole process much more user-friendly. Airbnb worked hard to make the design more sleek and modern so it felt more professional, and they also focused a lot on their review system, where both the host and the guest would review each other to make the site feel more trustworthy. Airbnb then poached customers straight from their competitors. They created software to automatically email anyone who posted their property on Craigslist, asking them if they wanted to list it on Airbnb as well. Plus, Airbnb's timing was perfect. They launched right after the 2008 recession, when lots more people wanted a way to make some extra money. Airbnb also invested heavily in technology, for example using machine learning and AI to match people to the most relevant listings based on their own tastes and booking patterns, to manage payments between buyers and sellers without relying on a third party, thus making Airbnb's platform a fully self-contained system, which again felt more secure. Airbnb's rapid growth is due to its global network effects. The more people list their places, the better the platform becomes for travelers, leading to more people wanting to list and exponential growth. The platform's scalability, not requiring property ownership, made it easy and cheap to expand globally. Airbnb's idea was to offer authentic travel experiences from real locals. However, during the pandemic, plans changed as the business model built around people traveling to new places and staying in strangers' homes couldn't survive. People were increasingly afraid of the coronavirus infections at Airbnb properties. As a result, they lost 80% of their expected business. In order to survive, they pivoted the entire company to focus on nearby travel as international travel was mostly restricted. They saw a huge increase in new bookings once they started focusing on nearby listings. However, some question if the business model is sustainable long-term. Airbnb ultimately is a business built around people staying in other people's homes, experiencing their local cuisine, sightseeing, and engaging in local activities. With the pandemic waning, this business might see a turnaround, but in the future, as pandemics and epidemics become more and more common due to climate change, the future of Airbnb is questionable without any alternative options for bringing profits. Despite this, the company has managed to survive many challenges and controversies, but the question remains if its core business model is profitable. And that's it. Hit the like and subscribe button. Press the bell icon to stay tuned to more of such interesting stories.